We start in Syria, where the country's official media says that Israeli airstrikes targeted areas in and near Damascus early on Monday morning. The alleged strikes, the first since July 19th, are said to have killed 4 Syrian soldiers and wounded 4 others. Syria's state-run Sana media outlet is reporting that the strikes took place at around 2:20 a.m. local time, which hit and damaged targets. Explosions were also heard above the city at around that time. Air defense systems in the Syrian capital were activated against the attacks, with the media claiming that it managed to knock down some of the Israeli missiles. There was no immediate reaction from Israel, which has a long-standing policy of not commenting on specific strikes north of its border, but it has admitted to conducting hundreds of sorties against Iranian-backed groups attempting to gain a foothold in the country over the last decade. And joining me now from Central Israel is Dr. Eran Lerman, the Vice President at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security and the former Deputy Director of Foreign Policy and International Affairs of the National Security Council for the Prime Minister's Office. Good morning to you, and thank you so very much for being here on this extended edition of the I-24 News Desk.
Good morning.
You've held senior posts in the IDF military intelligence. So explain to the viewers why the IDF maintains its policy of no comment on such strikes. It's no secret that Iranian proxies are in the area, nor that Israel targets them.
Well, there are lessons learned from past experience, going back to 2007, when we kept our silence for 11 years officially, although everyone knew. We struck the Syrian nuclear device, and the Syrians latched on to our silence and did not respond. And this has been Israeli policy throughout the last years, in which we were practicing what we called a campaign between the wars, Mabam by its Hebrew initials. And the idea is simple. We have no interest in putting the Syrian regime in a position in which they would feel obliged to retaliate in one way or the other. In fact, what they normally do is they blame Israel, they say that the Syrian opposition is an arm of Israel, and then they attack the Syrian opposition, which they do anyway. And so that kind of, let's say, tacit way out for the Syrians serves our interests, because we do not target essentially the regime as such, but its Iranian guests, so to speak, Iranian allies, Iranian supporters, and the militias that work with Iran or for Iran on Syrian soil. But we have no wish to come to a full-scale clash with the Syrian regime as such, which is backed also by, as we know, the Russians, and with the Russians we have a tacit understanding of our own. And so it's a complicated game, and it has served Israel well to speak about aggregate actions, but do not own up to almost none of the actual strikes. The exception is when we retaliate against Iranian attacks on our soil, as we did several times, for example, in 2018 on a very large scale. But that was specifically designed to openly retaliate against attacks by Iranian elements or pro-Iranian elements against Israel. Otherwise, this has been a very useful strategy or operational art element in the overall scheme of the CBW, the campaign between the wars.
Now, Syria regularly claims to intercept Israeli projectiles that come over the border, though military analysts doubt such assertions. Why is that?
Oh, well, I think everyone who knows anything about the manner in which such strikes are conducted knows that there's all kinds of decoys flying around the actual missile hitting home. So it's safe to assume that some of them can get shot down. It's irrelevant to the ability of the IDF to actually strike its targets.
And as you mentioned, obviously, all this comes with increased tensions along Israel's northern border with Lebanese terror group Hezbollah, another Iranian proxy group that's also allied with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Just how connected are Israel's northern neighbors, Syria and Lebanon, with regards to Iranian connections?
Well, Lebanon is no longer a Syrian satrapy, a Syrian province in effect. And that's been the case now for the better part of more than a decade, nearly a decade, really. Syria no longer controls what happens in Lebanon. Iran does. And Hezbollah is increasingly provocative for, I would say, a combination of several reasons. First of all, they are less committed now to the war, civil war in Syria, because this is sort of ground to a standstill and they are not as necessary for the survival of the regime as they used to be. Secondly, our own, let's say, deterrent effect, which was quite long-lasting after 2006, is by necessity a wasting asset. Deterrence is a psychological condition, not a physical thing. And it erodes, and this erosion is becoming more visible now. We saw this with the intrusion in Megiddo Junction by a Hezbollah operator. We see this with the tent provocation, minor and ultimately laughable as it may be. And moreover, another contributing element is perhaps the way they see the present situation in Israel, the internal fissures, this deep-running quarrel within Israeli society. And finally, they have been ordered by Iran for many years to keep their powder dry against the possibility that they would be needed in an emergency, namely in a situation where Israel acts against Iran's assets. This too may no longer be part of the Iranian calculus quite the way it used to be. And so they are becoming increasingly willing to risk at least minor provocations and see how they can prod us further and further. At the end of the day, they have to justify to the Lebanese people the ruin that they've brought upon them. And the only justification is that they are still in the business of destroying Israel. And that puts Hezbollah in a complex situation, which is for us a dangerous situation.
Absolutely. Dr. Eran Lerman, I want to thank you very much for your analysis and insights on this topic as it continues to develop. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.